nostalgia rages across the land, where everyone and their mother has a podcast, where there's still a movie trailer guy who says, in a world. Three friends revisit films, shows, and games that molded them as they search for answers to life, the universe, and everything in between. Settle in and join us for Screen Refresh.
So, hello out there and welcome to Screen Refresh, a show where we revisit the films, shows, and games from our childhood to try to take another look at what we fell in love with. As always, I'm Tim, and I'm joined by the rest of the Screen Refresh crew, Nick and Dean.
Hello there.
Good day to you, listener.
We're joined tonight by a special guest. You might know some of the films he's worked on, such as Jaws 2, The Blues Brothers, Airport 77, Phantasm 2, and a little movie called John Carpenter's The Thing. It's Von Babasin.
Hey, hello. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for coming on. It's always a pleasure. And especially that kind of murderer's row of films that we just mentioned there. Some favorites I know we'll get into those a little bit more in depth. I'm sure everybody is eager to hear about The Thing. I certainly would love to hear about Jaws 2. And I'm secretly, not secretly, I'm a fan of the Phantasm series. So when I saw Phantasm 2 mentioned, it kind of piqued my interest. So I'm sure I'll ask you a little bit about that later. But for anyone unfamiliar out there, kind of what is your background? I know you've had a background in film. You've worked on all of the movies I mentioned. You've throughout the 70s and 80s. You've done a lot of music. You've done both music for movies, music outside with bands and kind of records and things of that sort. So would you like to kind of give our listeners a little background?
Basically, I grew up under the tutelage of my father, Harry Babasin, who was one of the greatest bass players in jazz history, one of the innovators of West Coast jazz. He invented the bossa nova and was the first bassist in history to play pizzicato jazz cello as a lead instrument in 1947. And then my grandfather on my mom's side was an Academy Award nominated film editor for Universal for 40 years, did 130 films to his credit. Started with My Man Godfrey, which won Academy Awards out the yin yang.
William Powell.
But he also did things like Francis the Talking Mule. He did a couple of Abbott and Costello meets that thing, whatever, The Mummy.
Oh, that's great.
So he did, and he did all the Mon Pa Kettle. He did the Egg and I, the original Egg and I with Fred McMurray and Claudette Colbert, which was phenomenal. And that introduced Mon Pa Kettle. And so he did the whole series of Mon Pa Kettle movies. And then did some Rock Hudson, Doris Day flicks, Come September. Interesting array of films that he had. So I was growing up listening to my grandfather bitch out directors for continuity errors. And that was when you were splicing film. It wasn't pushing buttons on a digital monitor. You were cutting film and marrying it together, and that was, my uncle. I had a couple of uncles that also did that.
You run into an error like on that system. It's like, the backtracking you must have to do if you want to try to fix something was, I can't imagine.
Oh boy, he was a cursor too. My brother and I would be sent out of the room when it got a little too dicey for everyone. So that's what I grew up under. And obviously I started playing music at an early age and had a fascination with film, although I didn't really pursue film until I needed a gig. And my uncle said, oh my God, Universal's hiring off the hook right now. They were producing, at that time, they were self-producing a lot of stuff. Later on, when the CGI came in, also at the same time, Universal kind of adopted a new policy where they didn't want to fund the production of the film. They would just buy the distribution rights from the company that took the risk. If they liked the product, then they would just buy the distribution right. And so that really knocked down, it was just a skeleton crew then after that was working at the Universal lot. But when I first got there, every single stage on the lot was shooting something. And they were they were renting stages at Hollywood General and at MGM. And so they were just going crazy at that time. And they needed people on the books so bad, they didn't even have industry, people on the union books. So I was what was called a 30-day wonder. I got hired immediately. The next day I was hired, and within 30 days, I had the top experience one card you could get, instead of having to put in, the old timers who earned their one cards the hard way, going the 3, 2, 1, and putting in all those experience hours. I bypassed all that because they needed people in the books. So yeah, exactly. So I went on to Airport 77, worked 5 months, and the day I left 77, I was hired by the Jaws 2 crew, then went on 7 months location at Navarre Beach. And being a scrub, I mean, I hadn't even worked there a full year, wet behind the ears, and I'm getting the best location on the lot. I was envied, and people hated me for that.
So I know, was it just kind of, as you mentioned, because they were just getting so many projects out the door that, so you started, was Rich Man, Poor Man the first one that you worked on, the miniseries?
That was actually, yeah. What they have, that craft servicemen, when they're hired, they have a little place that they're put in the lot, and it's called the scene docks. And the scene docks are where they hold every wall that is shot on every TV show and every movie they have. Any room, they'll call the scene docks if they want to put together, like the bar at Cheers or what, just as an example. They'll call for those walls to be brought in, and they're built on a stage.
Oh.
And it would be the craft service to go pull the walls and bring them on a little cart to the stage where they're going to be built. So I went to the scene docks for one day, and they called me out to go work for the greens crew at Rich Man, Poor Man. And it was some abject location out in Pasadena. It was some old mansion that needed renovation. And I spent the first week helping spray paint the lawn green.
It was brown.
Now you see the stuff. It's actually, no. It's now they have some kind of chlorophyll-based stuff that you can buy on TV, and you spray it, and it's got seed, and it's chlorophyll-based. Well, that was actually invented years and years and decades ago. Greens people have been using it for a long, long time to make anything look green and lush. They would spray this paint on it, but it was chlorophyll based, so it would actually feed the plants, and it was a positive thing for the grass and not a negative thing.
Wow.
But
could save myself a lot of yard work growing up if I had that in Connecticut.
I've never heard of that. Yeah, like where can I get that now?
Yeah, plus potted plants outside a window, we would bring those in and set them up. If they wanted something to look a specific way, then we would supply all those plants around this mansion to make it look the way they wanted it to look. And then once the location was shot, we struck all that stuff out of there. And that was the end of my 2 weeks with green screen.
And then, so that is rolled directly into the work on Airport?
Exactly, yeah. The next day, I went back to the scene docks, and then they called me to report to Stage 27 to assist with the effects crew. And instead of only doing like a day or two there, I stayed for 5 months of the entire shooting. Yeah, it was awesome. Oh, it was so cool. Are you kidding me? I walked on that stage and I saw that fuselage with all those dump tanks, and I went, oh my God, I'm home. This is where I want to be. This is so cool.
And to think to go from that into Jaws 2, it's just kind of...
And just that, yeah, I was at Stage 27, which is kind of on the lower lot there. And directly across from 27 was an area called prefab, which was short for prefabrication. And that's where they were actually building the sharks. They were revamping the Jaws 1 sharks, new skin, new skeletal structure. They were rebuilding the entire structural support of the shark. And the crew was right there, and they saw me working my ass off for Airport 77. And I made an impression on those guys. And literally, the day I went to the shop after Airport wrapped, they said, we want Vaughn.
That's awesome.
And so I went down, reported down to prefab, and worked there for 5 months until they went on location to Martha's Vineyard. And I had to help load the trucks and wave goodbye to them because they didn't, apparently the union didn't have the same kind of rules in Martha's Vineyard. So they didn't need to take me. So they didn't take me. But once they went to Florida, the union rules were different. And they had to have one representative from the craft service union on the set. So they
Wow.
called for me.
Oh, cool.
Oh, so you didn't get to do the Martha's Vineyard, but then when they came down, so
It was awesome.
how much was shot down on the Florida location for that? Did they also do the shark scenes and whatnot down there as well, or?
Yeah. Well, all the shark scenes really were done in Florida.
Oh.
The Martha's Vineyard is for the exteriors.
Right, the
okay.
structures, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You know, even the lighthouse with the dead orca, that was all on location in Florida.
Okay.
That was a fake lighthouse. They built that lighthouse.
It's also seen Doc, they roll it out on a cart.
One of the sculptors from The Thing actually sculpted that orca. He was working, I didn't know him at the time, but he was working down in Florida and sculpted that gigantic killer whale. It's really good work.
It's interesting, those 6 degrees of how all of those connect into kind of the next one of you then go over to work on like Jaws 2. One of the guys who did the orca there worked on The Thing. So it's all kind of, it all ties together.
Definitely. Yeah, Roy Arbogast. It's funny because in those early films, it was very, very political to get your name in the credits. It really was very hard. It was actually, in the early days, it was really a money thing, because every time you put a character on film, it was a monetary expense. So only the main boss of special effects would get his name in there. Well, on Jaws 2, we had 40 to 50 guys at any one time on that crew.
Wow, yeah.
And there's only 2 people that have screen credit on Jaws 2.
I didn't realize that.
Bob Matty and Roy Arbogast.
Which I feel like nowadays you stay for the end credits.
That's most of the credits now.
I know.
Yeah.
Thousands of people. I know, it's ridiculous now. I was very fortunate that The Thing was right at the beginning of including more crew people, because then I actually warranted getting my name in the credit. Thank God.
It's like
so
the
cool.
assistant, like nowadays, like the assistant to the guy who did the animation on this one shot, like he gets a credit. Like nobody's left out nowadays.
The official soda bringer while he was waiting for the render on here for this model.
Yeah,
well, it's a shame, but like, at least you know that you were there and you can prove it.
I'd rather have too much than too little in terms of, because it would be a shame to, as you said, like some of these, to put work in or do these things and then have to go back and see it and say, sorry, we end up not having enough room, or we didn't put it in the list, or whatever the case may be. So,
well, in the original Star Wars, James Earl Jones is not credited as the voice of Darth Vader. Did you know that?
I didn't know he wasn't even in the credit listing.
Yeah, it's just David Prowse as Darth Vader, but even though we know who's the voice, he was not credited as such. He wasn't credited until the special edition, so that was 20 years after the fact.
I didn't realize that.
It's a shame his career never took off after that. So before we moved off of Jaws 2, was the shark any better than how it worked in the first one? I heard it was very temperamental in the first filming.
Yeah, well, the famous line from the first one is the shark working? And I actually, on my Facebook page, I have a call sheet that I randomly kept. It's just one call sheet that I had, but it's for an entire week, and every day gives you about 4 different choices depending on where the current was, if the shark was working, if it was raining, it'd be interior, you'd have to have 5 different effects ready to go at any given time, because they may be shooting it and call for it in 15 minutes over here.
A scheduling nightmare.
It was
like a choose your own adventure.
Yeah, an adventure. Right.
So after Jaws 2, the work there, now, was that another case of kind of, you just rolled directly into the next one after that at that point?
Not quite. I went back into the shop for a while. Now, the thing with Jaws 2 was when I got out there on location, I got certified as a diver and bumped up to prop maker. So I was actually, instead of a craft serviceman, I was actually working as a special effects man. So what I ended up doing was being able to cross over from there on. Throughout the rest of my time at uni, I would go back and forth between craft service and special effects. So after Jaws 2, I went into the effects shop for a while, But then I was doing things like I got on the night shift of the prop maker crew, and we'd do like a week up in the back lot on Buck Rogers. And then I'd be working all night in the shop on one of the spaceships for Battlestar Galactica, or we'd be pressing out. We had a giant vacuform machine that we made those Cylon helmets.
Cool.
That whole Cylon thing, that was all plastic vacuform. Remember the vacuform machines we had as kids? You know, it would soften the plastic and then suck the thing down over the form. That's how we made the Cylon uniforms. A gigantic, I mean, this thing was, you could put 12 foot by 16 foot plastic in there, and it would heat it. There'd be a heating coil, and then it would drop it down and suck it down over whatever forms you had. And they had really shiny Mylar plastic, so it was automatically this shiny Cylon. So a lot of that stuff, that's how I worked on the Blues Brothers, because the Blues Brothers I was only on for maybe a month. There were some pickup shots, the second unit kind of pickup shots that I got to work on, although I did get to meet Aykroyd and Belushi, which was awesome.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But we did when the bar in Chicago blows up, we did a miniature. We had a miniature Chicago street and breakaway bricks where we had actually built the bar with a little sign and everything. And then we had a air mortar back behind it. It wasn't actually pyrotechnic, it was air, because whatever works, you know. And since these were breakaway bricks, a nice air force just smashes that stuff apart. So we did that. We were also shooting cars through the air. You know, the Blues Brothers set a record for the number of vehicles destroyed on the set of a movie at the time. And we were like mounting these cannons down the center of cars and putting them down a pipe and then firing them through the air over the camera, so we would just see cars flying abjectly through the air with no point of reference. They were just flying through the air. Fun stuff. So I hung out there, did that kind of stuff for a few months until The Incredible Shrinking Woman came into view. And that was, even though it wasn't a great movie, great release and what have you, it was Joel Schumacher's directorial debut, which was significant in that respect. And it was huge. It was a gigantic green screen deal. You know, everything as Lily's shrinking down, getting smaller. We had stage 12 just had this huge, giant green screen. And we had giant Chinese food, and she's sitting at the table and gets hit by the champagne bottle and all this giant stuff that we were making. It was a lot of fun. We made a 35-foot tall section of gorilla shoulder. Structural steel, 35-foot tall.
Oh, wow.
From the top of the neck to the shoulder. And it's a close-up. He's got a collar on, and Lily is riding on his shoulder. So we built this thing, 3.5 months, structural steel, 20-man crew, and it's like 30 seconds of screen time.
Oh, maybe. Man.
Seriously, I mean, this gigantic, we covered the thing in 4-way stretch cloth, and we had hog rings and had to stipple this fiberglass roving all over this whole freaking thing and paint it brown so it looked like gorilla hair. Just a nightmare. And the fiberglass roving was stuff that it shatters and flies through the air, and you get fiberglass shards all through your skin, and you're sweaty and your pores open and you've got fiberglass everywhere, and it's just disgusting.
I was gonna say, like, I've insulated attics and things, and you get that.
Exactly.
I can only imagine how it is to just have that everywhere. Well,
on Jaws 2, we had a 55-gallon barrel of acetone on its side, and we would just barely crack the valve so it would trickle out and wash our hands in acetone to get the fiberglass resin off our hands. And acetone's like so deadly. It soaks through your skin, and through osmosis, it gets right directly into your bloodstream. We did some crazy things in special effects.
Where was OSHA? Where was OSHA at the time?
Yeah, exactly.
As far as so like some of the props, things like that you've worked on? I know a lot of times it's sets will be stored and reused or things like that will be used. Was that 35-foot gorilla thing ever reused for anything?
Oh, well, no. Oh, no. No. The only consistent set that I ever saw that was really reused was a set they called the Roundy Roundy. I know that's ridiculous, but that's what they called it. It was a huge round set that rotated on this big, huge base. So they used that. It started out, it was originally built for Gray Lady Down, which was just as I was first being hired, they were making the submarine movie called Gray Lady Down. For some reason, I got familiarized with that set at the time, but it was used again for Airport 79 Concorde. And they brought me to work on that because I had worked on the Roundy Roundy before. Oh, like it made any difference. But they put the fuselage down the center of this round set. So famously in that movie, the Concorde had to avoid being shot by a missile. So they did a barrel roll. You know, you can't barrel roll supersonic, but they did, of course. And so they actually rotated. I think they did it twice in the film that they completely rotated. So they had to have this fuselage down this round set. And another time they used it, there was a famous Dr. Pepper commercial that some guy like dances around the house. He's dancing and then he dances up the wall and then he dances up the roof and then he dances down the wall. Anyway, he dances through the whole thing.
It's like the old Fred Astaire bit.
And so the round set, obviously, as the wall became the floor, he dances down to it, and then it turned to the ceiling, and blah blah. So that was the big round set. I know. What do you do?
I feel like the Roundy Roundy. I feel like that was something which I know Nightmare on Elm Street was New Line at the time, but they did the same kind of the rotating set, which looks great every time it's used. Like it's such an effective look on screen when you're actually watching it, and you get to put down the Roundy Roundy as skills on your resume for forever.
Well, no one did more camera effects than Dean Cundy and John Carpenter. They were the king of all the different effects of all those creatures. Those are all, reverse photography. The dog in the corner that gets wrapped up by the tentacles, that's all reverse photography. People grabbing tentacles and running like mad so they're stretched to where they finally start to release the dog, and then they reverse the film and the tentacles just dive into the dog's body and tie him up. And
I feel like all of those kind of the in-camera and the practical and all of that is, I wouldn't say necessarily a lost art. I think it's just an overlooked art now, which I don't know if it's just a case of it requires more money and planning as opposed to if somebody's just good with the computer, they can kind of do the CGI portion there. But it's marrying the two is that tough part of, if your CGI is good, you should never notice that it's CGI. And it should be complementing the practical effects that are being done. So the thing is the one that I always think of when I think of practical effects, and that's what comes to mind.
Yeah.
It's a little tough depending on who you're showing it to say, oh, this is what practical effects is. Watch this movie. And then they get to the dog scene and they say, I'm all set. Trust me, it's great.
I do think it's a lost art, though, considering with everything that's nowadays and it's just purely CGI. And I appreciate the shots of films like Game of Thrones. I know is a big one, and I'm not talking about the dragon, but I mean the matte backgrounds that you don't realize that they're really not in Bravos. There actually is just a single green screen behind Arya, and then every ship, every dock that you see far off in the distance is purely CGI. That is awesome, and that's how it should be done. But when it comes to the good old special effects of blowing up a bar on the side of a street and then having just an air cannon being the thing that actually creates the whole explosion and making it done that way, I think is 100 times better, and I'm sure it still holds up a lot better too compared to a lot of the movies we see nowadays.
Yeah,
I would have to agree. Yeah, a lot of that too is the old timers passing down their knowledge. You don't have that same, tutelage and nurturing. In the old days, that's what you did. That's how you got it done. And now it's gone into a little sterile laboratory instead of being out here. They used to take, believe it or not, to flip a car, they would weld a cannon in the passenger seat that's pointed down. And I mean, it's like 1 inch thick or 3/4 inch thick steel cannon. And it's welded to the frame of the car, and it's open at the bottom. And they put in a black powder bomb and stuff a short telephone pole, piece of a telephone pole in that cannon. And then as they're driving along, they hit the button, and it forces that telephone pole out the bottom and flips the car. And that is an old style technique.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Explosions to move large objects.
Which I feel like you watch anything, whether it's a high budget film, a low budget film, if they do something like that, I don't care about the rest of the movie. That looks good. Like you never look at like a car flip or like an actual physical explosion and say, it looks fake.
Yeah. Like that, I think it was Fast and the Furious 5, which is a ridiculous series, but I enjoy it. But when I think they're in Brazil and they're towing a bank vault essentially behind their cars. But that's all practical. There's no CGI in that. They're like destroying cars, city blocks, and it's like it was one of the coolest action like set pieces I'd seen in a long time because it's real. Like there's real stuff going on, and it's like, yeah, you can't replace that.
Yeah,
that's true. No doubt about it.
You can always point out you can't always point out the good stuff, but you can always point out the bad stuff. It's noticeable.
Oh yeah, that like the scene of Mike being pulled out of the water as the shark tries to bite him. That famous scene, and it's just iconic. And yet now people stop frame on the exact moment the shark is next to the boat, and you can see that there's a ram down his throat. and one of the rigging wires got caught on his mouth, and so it distorts his mouth up like it looks like he has a hair lip or something. And so everybody online is all, oh, look at this scene. Oh, how could they have let that go? But look at this. And I try to tell people, well, wait a minute, movies aren't meant to stop motion frame by frame and criticize and pick out every little thing you see. You could do that with virtually any movie. There are almost continuity errors in almost every single film ever.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to look for them real hard, but still. So when they take a scene like that and then just get so hung up on, if you watch it in real time as the movie is shown, it looks great. And it's heart pumping, and they just pulled Mike out of the water in time, and people loved that. They thought it was thrilling.
Yeah.
Except the stop motion people.
Which I know we've talked about it previously on our show it's that the expectations now of, well, now we can watch this in 4K on an 80-inch TV at my house and zoom in on things. And it's like, well, yeah, now things are going to be noticeable because now you can see like every pore on a face. So, okay, well, I see where the costume was sewed in, or when I think Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles were in one scene when they open the mouth and you can see the person inside, because now all of a sudden you get that 4K view that you can enhance it. So sometimes I don't want to peer behind the curtain. It takes away the magic of the wizard. So it's great knowing how it's done. It's fun seeing all those behind the scenes, but when it's time to sit down and watch the movie, it's just enjoy the movie. It takes away from the magic knowing that, well, if I stop frame here, I can point out all of the things that are wrong or done incorrectly here, or any of the things that look like they were off. It's one of those things that a little too nitpicky.
Those are the type of people, though, that instead of watching the magic trick, they're trying to break down in their head as to how the magic trick is actually happening, instead of just sitting back and enjoying the spectacle that's happening in front of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hypercritical.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can pick apart scenes in The Thing that I have personal pet peeves over, but I don't want to share those because then it ruins it for other people to even, every time they see that scene, they'll see it the way I see it. And then they'll go, oh, well, you just ruined that for me. I prefer not to point that out.
So as far as the work on the thing from there, so we're even for that matter, coming over from like Jaws and everything, were special effects something that had interested you leading into that, and then kind of that's what drew you to learning more about those while you're on all of these sets? Or was it just this is another skill I can learn, this is something else I can do that can kind of better my career throughout movies?
I think once I started doing it, I couldn't imagine doing anything else on the set. I mean, I was interested in the actual camera work, but special effects, I swear, it's like the star of the show. On a set, when a big star is going to be there that day to shoot, you'll have the producer and the director's family will show up. There'll be looky-loos that'll hang out on the set because they want to see that particular person. In a shooting schedule, there's only a certain number of days that every actor has to be there. They're not there every day of shooting because they're only there when they actually partake in the lines that are being shot. So when they show up on the set and people know they're going to be there, they show up. Well, it's definitely the same thing with effects, especially in a big explosion. If we're like, I remember the Big Bad Mama house, Big Bad Mama 2 was the most exciting explosion I thought I've ever taken part in. We blew up the entire house. The Phantasm 2 house we blew up, we had to leave structurally standing. We couldn't actually destroy the house. So it had to just visually look like we blew the hell out of it. But the house for Big Bad Mama was a fake house built up at Indian Dunes, which famously was the place where the Twilight Zone tragedy with Vic Morrow took place.
Yeah.
But Indian Dunes was a place that we shot many, many things there. And we built this facade house and literally the fireball was bigger than the house. And we blew that thing up. And they had 10 cameras on it, because once you blow something up like that, you're never going to have two takes on something like that.
I missed it.
So they literally had 10 cameras set on this thing. And the trick of this was we had mortars. We had gas mortars on every window, every door. Behind the house, we had 2 gigantic 20-gallon gas bags that were with 1-pound black powder bomb lifters that were just gigantic. Anyway, you stand in the middle of this house, all you can smell is gasoline. But the thing about the explosion is it was set off by a Molotov cocktail. So you've got this you've got
the
this
safest way.
A Molotov cocktail, and he throws the Molotov cocktail into the house. So the house, the front room, has to look like it's got a fire already burning before it blows up. So here I am standing in the middle of the living room, smelling nothing but gas. Got a gallon can of rubber cement in one hand and a big lighter in the other. And the director's out front and he goes, okay, roll camera 1, roll camera 2, roll camera 3, roll camera 10. Okay, Vaughn, light the fire.
God.
So I pour out the freaking rubber cement and light that baby. And on one of the cameras, all you see is just this shot, this streak out the back door. And that's me. And as soon as I got to safety, I tapped the pyrotechnician and he blew that thing up. And it was just insane. But I'll always remember that. Okay, Vaughn, light the fire. Oh, okay. Here I am, lowest man on the totem pole. Let's go wrong. Well, at least he was the lowest paid guy. Oh my God.
The classic, can't see a thing in here. Smells like gas. Let me light a light.
What was the trick to not blowing the structure of which other film you were talking about? You couldn't blow it up?
Phantasm 2?
Phantasm. The Phantasm, well, again, what you'll do is we have mortars that are on an angle. And what you do is you put your explosive explosive at the base, and then you put a piece of Celotex, like a paperboard, to protect that, and then you pack it with sand, and then wet the sand down with gasoline. So the sand packs a punch, and it goes directly where you want it. So you're not really, it's only going to hit what you're aiming it at. So you're not taking out structural supports of the building. You're just blowing a door out, or you're blowing a window out. And with the gas soaked, the sand is soaked into the gasoline is soaked into the sand, it blows up in a fireball. So it has impact and it has fire. And again, it doesn't hurt anything. And now, instead of the big mortars in back of the building for Big Bad Mama, we had these mounted on the rooftop. So there's no force. You're not going through anything. You're actually just producing the fireball above the roof on the back side. So you're not even seeing the mortars there. And again, you get the visual perception. Every window blows out. Every door blows out. This huge fireball comes out the roof. But structurally, you really haven't bothered the integrity of the building itself. So, and then you have fire bars that are hooked up to propane tanks. And so that the residual flames that are still going are propane coming through those bars. So you still see, after the explosions go away, you still see fire in the windows and all. That's just residual stuff that we're controlling to make it look that way.
Now, in a case like, you said they built the facade for the one that they blew up.
Right.
For like the Phantasm 2, was that one that they ended up building specifically for that, or was that just one that they ended up having?
It was a condemned building in Los Angeles.
Oh, okay.
So it was condemned, so nobody was living there, but for some reason we couldn't completely destroy the thing. We had to, again, leave the integrity of the building behind.
Did
for whatever reason, I really don't know why, but
was there like a fire team standing, like they put out the fire immediately kind of deal?
Sure.
Wow.
As soon as
just
cut
to save
was,
it, yeah. So I just watched the
midway through the scene.
I just watched the explosion on YouTube. I'm like, wow, like they put that out, like they saved that building. Wow.
There was always a fire crew. You always had to have fire marshal on the set whenever you were doing any kind of pyrotechnics.
But just seeing that scene, like, oh, we saved that house, like, it's crazy. It's like, it looks like it's gone.
It's probably the only real estate I could afford out in the Los Angeles area. So I know everybody had a couple things as far as the thing. I didn't want to end up stepping off before you guys had a chance for anything that you wanted to ask about John Carpenter's The Thing.
I think we got a little bit about the wolf scene in the pen, but I mean that the blood test scene. Can you talk a little bit about that and like that transformation scene when they're on the couch?
Yeah, that was actually I was asked to sit in for Palmer at one time. We were shooting at Heartland. It was long after the cast had been released, so so much second unit stuff happened at the Heartland facility. Are you aware of the Heartland facility at all?
No.
About that? That's where it was off the lot from Universal. It was originally built as a camera laboratory for all of the computerized spaceship stuff for Battlestar Galactica and Buck Rogers. So they were just like all these different rooms that were little laboratories, and they had tracks that cameras rode on and moved around the spaceship models. Anyway, once those two shows were gone, there was this facility, and Bottin didn't like having the producers breathing down his neck. So he didn't really want to work on the lot at Universal where he could be easily breathed down the neck of. So he asked for some kind of an off-lot facility, and this Heartland facility was offered. So it's a little building in North Hollywood, and that's where we reported to every day. And that's where all the creatures were built. After British Columbia, they came back and they had already wrapped. It was anything that was shot after that was pretty much at Heartland and was second unit stuff. But all of the Charlie Hallahan head ripping off, all the dog stuff, all that stuff was all shot at Heartland after the fact.
Okay.
So that, interestingly enough, was actually shot at Universal.
Okay.
Because it took place in the compound room on stage 27, where that couch was. And the couch was rigged. We had to, again, stage 27 had that pit underneath. So we had the couch rigged with a ram. So when Palmer plants his feet and he picks the couch up, the ram lifts on that one side with him. And the other two guys, Gary, and he starts to go through his transformation. The mask that they had for Palmer, they started pumping benzene, which is a really, really volatile, like acetone. And it destroys, slowly eats away at the latex, the foam latex that they made. So as they pump the benzene, you'll see his face starts pulsating and distorting. That's all this benzene that's eating away at the face. And then the head, then he lifts up and then the head splits. That was a whole other thing too.
Oh yeah. It's pretty gruesome.
And the whole windows and how we had to connect the heads together. so he was kicking.
Oh yeah, there's a guy under all that for some of those parts, yeah.
Well, those two were animatronic.
Oh really?
The full body burn was a guy.
Okay.
And yeah, the when windows get spit away and he slides over in the corner, there's a guy behind the wall with a couple of rods that's moving his legs as he kicks, and he's on fire and he's writhing there.
Wow.
But Tony Caesar, he's the guy that did the full body burn. That was an ordeal too, because he had this whole thing on, and they lead a tube, an air hose up to his mouth, and he breathes through that air hose while they prep him for this whole thing. And once they're ready to go, they yank that air hose, and he has to hold his breath, because if he inhales, he'll inhale liquid fire.
Yeah. Gosh.
Yeah, I know. So he's, it's okay to light Tony, and they pull this thing out, light him up, and then he's kind of walking around. He's amazing. I couldn't believe how long he milked that for. But he kind of wanders around, then he walks around that corner, and he goes through a balsa wood wall and through the stage, and then there's guys at the other side with fire extinguishers that put him out immediately.
So
we shot that 3 times.
Oh my gosh. Had to rebuild.
He made like 10 grand every time they lit him up. So he made 30 grand that day.
Oh,
just,
wow.
Lighting him on fire. And boy, what a thing. And yeah, Windows. That of course, he was a real person. But the whole head split and the 2 bodies that are grappling, those are built bodies.
Wow.
And they're controlled by air rams, that are kicking his feet out until he spits him into the corner, and that's still the doll, like I said. So yeah, we had a lot of bodies on that flick.
When he walks through that wall, is that exterior, is that all soundstage and like fake snow kind of situation?
That's when he's inside and walks through, that's the soundstage. And then when you're exterior and he walks through and goes into the snow, that's location in BC.
Oh wow, that's the British Columbia. Okay.
So it's interesting the way it's cut.
Was it the same guy did he do the burn on location too, or was that a different?
I believe so. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
He's like a specialist in full body burns.
Right. You want that person for that scene.
It's a living.
That's a long. That's a long burn. He just walks out, lays down in the snow. He's up for a good 10 seconds or something like that.
Which, watching the film, it never crosses my mind that there's the switch between on location and then back between the two there. So these are all that magic of the magic of cinema.
Those are the scenes you cannot find in the movie.
Yeah, that's a picture online that has Cundy sitting at the camera overlooking the block of ice that they find in the Norwegian camp.
Mm-hmm.
And that was on stage 4, and it was 100 degrees that day outside the soundstage. We brought in an ice rink floor to preserve the ice.
Oh.
And the night before, well, every time we'd be ready to shoot the next day, they would bring every available portable air conditioning unit they had on the lot and put it around the set in the stage and run it all night. And then we had, as the effects guys, we had taken paint sprayers, just the spray gun, not the actual canisters, but just the spray gun. And we hooked them up to hoses, directly to 3/4-inch water hoses, and had them in the permanents, which are the grip beds way high, the permanents at the very top of the stage. And we had little strings to the triggers, and we could, from down below, we'd just pull the string and it would pull the trigger and it would release very fine mist of water. So between the air conditioning units running all night and the water mist in the air, we got the right combination for the breath to be visible, and to try to make that look like it was cold. When I was with Dean Cundy at the Comic-Con, we were talking about that, and he was laughing about how it looked when we'd walk off stage. The whole crew would come off stage in all these parkas, and people would look at us, because it's 100 degrees in the middle of summer in LA. They thought we were all crazy as loons. Of course we were, but wow. Yeah, that was a challenge, definitely.
That's awesome.
I was gonna say, I feel like the person doing the burn scenes probably didn't walks outside and says, "Yeah, this is fine." It's amazing the amount of work and kind of the thought process that goes into getting things like just the condensation of their breath in those scenes and whatnot. Because I think part of the over-analysis of movies that have been out a while, I think somebody had mentioned that all the work like Kubrick did on The Shining, and they didn't do the condensation correct on the breath from like outside in the maze scenes. And it's, somebody will always find something.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a CGI effect that doesn't always look okay either.
Yeah.
You can always tell when they've added in later after the fact. You'd always could tell it's fake. But that's the last thing I look for too. And like, in that part, at that point in The Shining too, like seeing frost breath, I think is the last thing on my mind.
Yeah. If the movie's affected,
I feel like if
literally
you're noticing
chasing
that solely, then the rest of it has failed to grab your attention. So it's hearing the behind the scenes of kind of the process and the work that went into it for doing The Thing is just interesting to kind of know. Because to me, it's, maybe am I naive watching these movies and it's still just, oh yeah, it's obviously they're in Antarctica shooting this, clearly, doing this entire scene, and that's their actual breath, because they flew Kurt Russell thousands of miles out into the middle of nowhere and made him tramp through the ice.
I buy it.
Well, they actually did, but just for only 3 weeks. We shot for 7 months on stage 27.
In Alien, the chestburster scene, when they filmed it, it was like a marvel at the time because no one had ever seen anything like that. All the actors on stage, they knew what to expect, but they didn't know what to expect. They just knew something big was going to happen at the scene, and when they filmed it, it was the shock on their face was equal. Were there any effects that you guys were doing that you kind of had that same feeling that like you didn't kind of know or expect how everyone would react to it? Because The Thing it's got some special effects work in there, man, that like I haven't seen anywhere else when it comes to like just the creativity behind it too. It's just some real extreme, not besides gore, but just the creativity behind someone thought up all this stuff,
Yeah.
Were there any like effects like that really kind of like made you like kind of double take like, whoa, this is really something?
Well, the only thing, personally speaking, I hadn't really been exposed to makeup special effects like this. Bottin had done The Howling, and there was American Werewolf, and there were a few things that had occurred before this that were similar. I had never seen anything like that. So when I first started out, I was with the mechanical effects crew. So I was hired by Roy Arbogast, who, again, I had worked with on Jaws 2, also on Incredible Shrinking Woman. So he brought me in on this project. And so I was working on effects that were similar to what I'd done in other movies. Like we did the turtle shell that bursts through the floorboards and runs at the very end of the movie.
Yeah.
Hurts, and the tentacles come out and grab the detonator and bring it down into the hole. Well, the whole running of the lower part there, that was all balsa wood boards that were laid in and they were flocked over. And we had mounted this cart on a track that was cabled and compounded so it would go super fast. And it had a ram with this fiberglass turtle shell on it. So you could initiate the pull on the cart and at a given point hit the ram and the shell blew its way through the boards and it would continue tearing the boards up until they sucked the ram back down and it disappeared underneath. So that was kind of a traditional mechanical effect that I had always worked on. So that's the kind of stuff I was doing at the very beginning through the principal photography. So then in comes Botine. Holy crap. I'd never seen anything like that. The first thing that I saw shot was the autopsy.
Oh.
And they shot that on a set at Universal, another stage altogether. And they brought in from a butcher, they brought in actual cow entrails.
Oh, man.
Because Botine wanted the real look, So when he slits that open and he starts pulling out things, well, what we have here is just a normal set of organs. It's like, So it kind of took me aback for sure. And then when we wrapped out of there, like a week later, Botine's crew didn't do anything about the entrails. They just left him there on stage.
Oh, man.
All of a sudden, somebody's saying, hey, there smells like there's something dead on that stage. And of course, me being the low man on the totem pole, I got to take care of that. So that was my introduction to Botine. And I was like, I don't know if I like these makeup effects guys very much.
I feel like a lot of the ones, it's probably the same case now, but I feel like it was, we don't have to make it. We can just buy entrails or intestine or whatever the case is. I think it was George Romero's Day of the Dead that they have the whole scene at the end of the movie when the army leader ends up getting kind of torn apart and they just bought all of these entrails to use. But they had done so many takes and it had been so long that rather than just going out and buying more, it was still these original ones. So in between, they had to have all the zombies stop and try to like wave it away from him. That way he can kind of just maintain himself for the next shot. That's the one part that actors are probably saying, just please use CGI on this one.
Well, like a couple of Botine's guys in the very early morning would go on like roadkill look cruise and they'd go to taxidermists and see if they could find malamutes and appropriate dog hides for our purposes. So it's pretty gross. I have a picture of me holding a German Shepherd hide that was a puppet that they used to block out the shots for the dogs. It's kind of gross, kind of gruesome. But what are you gonna do?
I feel like despite everything that happens in the movie, like the scenes on the couch, the scenes with the head tearing completely off the body and turning into a spider, and when they use the paddles and the chest opens up, I feel like the dog scene is really the one that kind of sets the ground for when you're trying to show people the movie. It's if you can make it through this, just please make it through this scene, and I guarantee you the rest of it will also be terrifying and disgusting, but at least in a different way.
Well, the skin splits 4 ways, and then the skull splits 4 ways, and then the tongue rolls out.
Yeah.
Easy peasy.
So yeah, That we affectionately called that the meat hole dog.
Oh.
Once it was peeled back, it was just a meat hole, and that's what we call
That'll be my next pet dog's name, Meat Hole.
Meat hole.
So around this time, so following kind of your work in The Thing, what was next for you career-wise after that?
Well, it was interesting because that was 1983, and 82 was the release of the film, but 83 I was kind of deciding what I wanted to do. Now I was kind of thrown or taken aback by Bottin, who was 23 years old, and he was given $3 million to make creatures. And here I was 28, and I'm thinking, now I'm not in a position in my life where I'm going to be calling shots. And I want to do more. And I'd always been a musician, so I was with a group at that time that we were recording an album, and also the company that we got picked up by, it was a small independent label in Los Angeles. They had a music video division. Of course, it didn't pay any money, but it was an opportunity for me to produce and direct music videos as well as record music for this company. So I thought it was pretty cool. I went out to Indian Dunes, and they had a set that coincidentally had been built for Escape from New York. It was just this New York street out in the middle of a motocross bike route. But it was cool. And I rented horses and costumes and laid out the whole storyboard. And the record label president said he'd never seen anything so professional. And it was a joke compared to what I'd been working on, multi-million-dollar productions. So I ended up, we did a little recording contract with them, and I got a couple of music video credits. I had one that was nominated for an independent award at the 1984 Billboard MTV Music Video Conference, which is now the MTV Awards. But that back then, it was nothing back then. So it was just breaking through.
And now working on all of the movies prior, do you think that you picked up anything from there that helped you in making any of the music videos, things of that sort? Kind of seeing the other directors, seeing other kind of seeing Dean Cundy work behind camera, everything of that sort?
Well, yeah. I mean, it was nothing on that level. Obviously, I only wish it would have been, but yeah, it was nothing like Cundy's work. This was winging a prayer. Probably more similar to maybe Halloween than it would have been to The Thing. Because Halloween, it was winging a prayer back then, although they were still pretty legit. So, I think Cundy went to UCLA film school, and so they were pretty legit to start with.
Did we get the name of the video?
Well, the first one I did for my band was called Uranus. And the song was called Lonely Street Fighter, and it's actually still on YouTube. It can be found. It's pretty embarrassing, but I don't mind. It's part of my history. So I don't think the one that was nominated ever got bumped over. Anybody ever uploaded it?
Oh, really?
I don't exactly know why, but whatever. Probably the artist didn't really care, so they didn't really pursue anything with it.
Which it's kind of a shame that we have something like the internet of all these years, but all of those ones that kind of missed coming over, like even movies, like the VHS ones that just never transitioned over to DVD or never then transitioned on from there. So it's all of these things that just got kind of lost in the shuffle over time. So it's always fun being able to find some of those, or find some of it that maybe somebody somewhere had a cassette copy, or somebody somewhere had a VHS copy, and you find this like distorted version sitting out on some old website somewhere, and it's a blast from the past.
That was the movie that we did the soundtrack for. It was called Forever, A Ghost of a Love Story, and it starred Keith Coogan and Sean Young and Diane Ladd and Sally Kirkland. And it went direct to video and never got remastered on DVD. it had the absolute worst review at the Cannes Film Festival I think any movie's ever received. And of course, we got to appear in the movie too, so it was something.
If nothing else, go for infamy, I suppose.
That's right. For sure.
Now, as far as that one, so that one you did the soundtrack to, you did the score for, you recorded the music on it. Being a musician, kind of doing the albums, things of that sort, live music, do you find it was kind of a different experience than having to do this for a film? Or because it's not anything that you're necessarily kind of creating with your own thoughts in mind, it's creating it to adhere to a movie or kind of a predetermined story kind of deal?
Sure, definitely a different thought process. And I've always, even back with the music video, I've always enjoyed, well, my entire life, I've always enjoyed the mixture of music and film. I thought it's natural, hand in hand type of thing. You know, I think my father had always hoped to do a movie soundtrack, but just never got that avenue open to him. So it's just funny the way things happen, you know, how doors open. I went to a little kind of a night school for film, and the teacher's name was Tom Palmer Jr., and he was the first-time director of this Forever movie. So when he got the opportunity to direct this movie, he called me to do the special effects on it, because it was a kind of a ghost story, and there was some intrigue involved with it, a little bit of effects, just light effects. But I immediately said, "Hey, do you have a soundtrack? You know, you have a band, music yet?" And he said, "No, that sounds great." And so I ended up, I think I have my name in the credits of that movie 7 or 8 times. I did the Foley, we did special sound effects, we did all the featured music, we appeared in it, did the special effects. I don't know, whatever. It was crazy. I was trying to carry the whole production on my back just to make sure it would make it, because I just wanted the soundtrack to release.
Which I feel like with your kind of the family background of going from movies, all the background in music, that doing soundtracks and doing music videos are kind of that natural culmination of all of this history down into that of, yep, just combine it all.
That's right. Exactly. That's, you know, and that's why I've been working so hard on this documentary for my dad. It's seemed like a no-brainer to me. You know, I had, like I said, I was sponsored by the New York Foundation for the Arts for 4 years, and it took them all of a week to sign a contract with me because they thought the story was that legitimate. In fact, they still host the page on their website, even though our contract's been up for 10 years. They still see the legitimacy of my father's contribution to jazz. And so it's a legit deal. I mean, it's crazy. Life is so funny. You would think I'm like Hollywood's native son. I've pretty much done it all, but it's not quite.
Now, as far as the work on the documentary on your father and kind of his contributions to jazz, everything of that sort, is that a project that any listeners, anybody out there, is that something that they can support or find more information on, or kind of anything that's out there?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like I said, the page at NYFA is still there, so I can be contacted through that. I do have a Facebook page that's called Jazz in Hollywood that's dedicated to Dad. He had a record label in 1954 called Nocturne Records, and they released a series of albums to define the West Coast jazz movement, and he called it the Jazz in Hollywood series. So it's got a pretty famous story into itself, obviously. All the major jazzers that came through Hollywood, and a lot that stayed because of the climate and, you know, and the work and the studios and what have you, was a good place to be. So, you know, that's just working on giving that more of a definition. I think I had mentioned that we're doing a presentation for the International Society of Bassists in June at a conference to honor his contributions and a little bit of notoriety, just to get him at least included in the history books. You know, he's kind of an unsung hero, and so I would just like him to be a little more recognized for what he gave.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's something that, as a fan of movies, a fan of music, a jazz fan, it's something that it's of interest of seeing all of these other people that might have had impact on the industry, had impact on kind of music in general. All of these kind of the documentaries, things like that, of these are people that you might not otherwise know immediately. Because I think some of the ones that he performed, I saw one of the albums with like Chet Baker, things of that sort, that you might know that name, but you got to go back through and see who else played with them, who else kind of did these things with them. Because I'm sure there's kind of thousands of these stories of everybody that's out there that's contributing that needs more awareness, recognition. So anybody out there,
please
check it out.
Yeah, please.
It's America's music. It's America's music, you know? And it was a time when players played. They had to play. They couldn't go program a drum. You know, if they wanted a drum track, they went and found a drummer to play with. You know, they went and hooked up with their buddy and they played. That's what music was all about. And those guys were at a level that, you know, I don't know. You see them in educational institutions, but you don't see it in popular music.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's an accident of popularity that if a person is creative and marketable,
Yeah.
you know, it's kind of an accident of. You have to have the image, though. Ever since MTV, pretty much, you've had to have a visual image in order to pull off a music career, which is really a shame.
Yeah.
So for anybody out there, any listeners who are music fans, take 2 minutes out of your day, go check it out. It's great stuff. Maybe you might get into jazz. It's great.
Now we should go back to the movies now. I have some stories. I want to tell you the big story that I'm the only one that ever tells.
Oh.
Yeah, Stuart Cohen said that it was the $40,000 mistake. And so nobody ever admits to it. When I first met John Carpenter, it was at the end of 3.5 weeks of work in the back lot. We went up, we had to go to the highest hill in the back lot above the dump. So you didn't have any horizon line in the background. So it would appear to be like Antarctica. So we spent this time, we covered the hillside in muslin sheets and then covered the muslin with gypsum, 100-pound bags of gypsum on a hillside like this. And there were fiberglass rocks that were placed amongst them to appear like Antarctica. So this was supposed to be the skyline of Antarctica now. Now we have 3 miniature helicopters. Yes, I said miniature helicopters. They're probably about 10 to 12 foot long.
Were they like single person or?
No. They're mini. I mean, they're miniature. They're remote control.
Oh.
Okay, people can't fit in them. They're not that big. They're remote control. So the idea of this was the helicopter that's pursuing the dog is going to accidentally come too close to a rock and hit the tail rotor on a rock. And it's going to break off and the helicopter is going to crash. Well, this is the original design for the beginning of this movie. So we get to all this set up for a month, build a 20-foot scaffolding. John Carpenter, Dean Cundy, the crew's up there. They're all looking. They're all ready. We're down on the ground. The guy preps the first helicopter. And John says, okay, let's get it up in the air. Let's see it fly. We just want to get an idea of what it looks like. So he gets it up, and it's beautiful. It's humming around. They like the way it looks. Real good. On one pass over the hillside, now fiberglass rocks from the staff shop, I don't know if you know, generally they're hollow. You only see them from the front. You only have to fool the camera. So the backside of rocks like that are empty. And they've got a wooden frame inside, but they're hollow. So on this one pass from the backside, one of the pontoons of the helicopter hooks one of the rocks. Boom. Smashes right there. That's the best helicopter, #1 helicopter. Destroyed before a frame can even be shot.
Good.
Bummer. Okay. So scratch helicopter #1. Prep #2. Okay, well, in order to get a consistent brake in the tail rotor, because you've got 3 helicopters. If you're going to shoot them twice, you want that brake to be in the exact same spot. So in order for that to happen, they mounted an explosive squib in the tail so it would break off at the specific right spot. Well, squibs are set off by electronic impulses. So the guy is prepping the helicopter on the ground, ready to go, and the tail rotor blows off, sitting on the ground. So it didn't even get in the air. The tail rotor blew off. Some kind of signal somehow set that squib off. So number 2 is now gone. So now we're down to the last and the 3rd helicopter. So John looks over, says, okay, get it going. They get it prepped, get it up in the air. The thing was the number 3rd helicopter. It never looked good. It kind of listed. It didn't ever look steady. It was spewing some kind of like gas exhaust out the tail. It just looked bad, terrible. And John just looked at the guy and said, "What? Why does this look so bad?" And the guy said, "We were never supposed to need the 3rd one." So John looked over at the crew and said, "Okay, everybody, that's a wrap." And that was the last they ever thought about doing the miniature helicopter.
Oh,
they ended up doing it, obviously, with real size helicopters on location in British Columbia. But that was the $40,000 mistake. Apparently, Stu said that it was Roy Arbogast and John Lloyd that talked John into trying this out. And nobody likes to tell that story, though. I don't understand it. Why is that not? I love it. I think it's great. I was surprised we weren't fired right there.
Yeah, I feel like if it's a story that ruined the production and the thing ended up never taking off, then that's one thing. But it's a classic.
It still made its way out of production.
Yeah. So somehow, I mean, it's only known as one of the greatest horror films of all time and special effects displays.
Who had fabricated the helicopters?
That Roy was really trying to sell it.
Okay.
And I really don't know why. I guess he thought that they'd be able to save money and not do it on location. I never really understand how those decisions are made. But there was, as far as I could tell, there was never any way that was going to work. I can't even imagine with the tail rotor blowing off. I don't know where they were going with the story. You know, of course, now I'm seeing it the way it came out, and that's the only way the story works for me. Right. So I can't try to put it together the other way, and I just can't really imagine how were they going to crash? Were they going to come out of that and then shoot at the dog? Or, I really don't know how that was going to work in, but obviously it was such an abysmal failure that it never went anywhere.
As far as the scenes like that from the thing, do you have any stuff that you've run into, kind of the funny stories from over the years on like Jaws 2 or any of your other productions? Sure.
Well, Jaws 2, we bought a tugboat on Jaws 2. The sandbar on the beach at Navarre Beach would change overnight. One day you could walk out a mile, and the next day it would come right up to our pier. There was a pier right at Navarre at the Holiday Inn where we stayed, and we would shuttle from the end of the pier. They had Boston whalers that would pick us up and shuttle us out to wherever the set was. So there was some high muckety-muck producer dude. He was out at the end of the pier, and he couldn't wait for a Boston whaler. He was so angry. He was so upset. He had to get out to the set right away. So they ordered this tugboat to come in to pick him up off this pier. Well, the sandbar was too shallow for the tug, and the tug got stuck and literally sank.
Oh, God.
That was $100,000 boat. And I got pictures. I can prove it. I got pictures. There was another boat called the Francis Candies, and you can see they've got this cable, and he's trying to pull that boat off the sandbar. There was no hope. No hope. It just, the waves beat that thing to death and just sank right there.
Did he ever make it to set?
No. Oh, I don't know what happened to that guy, to tell you the truth.
He's still there.
I don't know if he's the one that ended up buying the boat or not.
Give it a couple of years, and James Cameron will send a sub down, do another undersea. Yeah, the Jaws 2 tugboat now on IMAX.
I'm telling you, it's terrible. Off the top of my head, there was another mistake I remember. There was a mini series once called Condominium.
That one I'm unfamiliar with.
Made for TV, and apparently the big culmination of it is a hurricane hits the condominium and the tragedy and blah blah. Another one of those things. So famously on stage 27 again, because of the pit, they built this scale model of the condominium. It was huge, but it was a scale model. It was beautiful, surrounding island, everything, all the landscaping, the exterior, everything. What had happened was there was a cover that went over the pit of stage 27, which was the one that was filled with water for the fuselage for Airport 77. Well, they were going to do the same thing with the condominium for the storm to hit. So they had Ritter fans, there was water machines, there were all kinds of stuff ready to just blow the storm to hit this condominium. And what they did is they kind of built it halfway over the pit. So there was the cover, and then there was the pit, and the condominium was built that way. So you could still get underneath, and there were rams that were going to pull parts down out of the condominium as the structure collapses. So that's how they were going to control demolition of the model as the storm hits it. So everything's a go. Night before, they tell the plumbers, okay, we're ready to shoot this in the morning, fill the pit with water. So it's filling overnight. The crew shows up in the morning. The deck that was partially over the cover, it's made of wood. Folks, wood floats. So they filled this thing with water. The wood floated, tore the whole condominium apart. Before they even arrived at the set the next day. Literally everyone from every corner of the lot that could be pulled off of a crew was brought to that stage to clean that mess up. The effects crew was fired on the spot, that nobody could figure out how such an oversight could ever been made. But that was a huge monetary loss.
That one hurts.
Now, in a case like that, is that something where they pivoted and did a different idea, or was it just, we'll try to do this thing again, we'll just do this in a slightly different way now?
Well, yeah, they had to fall back and regroup, but no, it was just a complete ridiculous oversight to not even consider the fact that the wood deck would float. It's just, that's the kind of thing. Roy, I tell you, Roy Arbogast is considered a genius for his work on the thing and all this stuff. But I saw him pick up a wax tub of flash powder with a lit quick match in it. And it didn't ignite. And so he picked it up and looked into it. And it blew up in his face, burned off his eyebrows, singed his hair back, grayed his glasses. And this is the genius of the thing. Sorry, Roy, no disrespect, but I saw you do this. I have the picture I have of me with Roy and Mike was taken by the painter on the set, Ward Welton. He took that picture, and on the back of it, he wrote Roy Flash Arbogast. he knew the story.
I feel like all these different things of setting fire, like blowing up the buildings and all of this, where it's, oh yeah, we'll have a guy inside the building for this. I wonder if it's just during that time frame of like the 70s and 80s of, yeah, we'll just have somebody just do it themselves, and if something happens, we'll figure out something. I wonder if it's all of those things throughout the 70s and 80s that now it's very strict guidelines on probably most of these sets on how all of these are done now in terms of how do we set this off in a house? Well, now it's a robot or it's remote or however it's kicked off from there. So
That's why we can't have nice things.
Yeah. Yeah, you can have things like sterno, and you could crack propane and have the sterno ignite it. You can do little weird things like that. But ultimately you still have to have the ignition take place.
yeah.
So, you could have an electric spark that could ignite something. Yeah, there are definitely ways to do it. It's just usually it's on a wing and a prayer, and the director's waiting, the camera's ready, and it's like, Bond, get in there and light that fire, damn it.
It's the surefire way it works.
Well, and they paid the price on the Twilight Zone. I'm sorry to say, I know that the director, was it Landis? I think it was Landis.
Yeah.
I know he's sitting there, bring that helicopter down. I want it in frame. I wanted it, and he just got it too close to the explosion, and boom, that's all it took.
Which, for any listeners out there that have the AMC Plus or Shudder, they have a series called Cursed Films that does an episode on the Twilight Zone movie and kind of all of the production that went into it, that discusses the tragedy during the scene filming with the children and Vic Morrow. For anybody that may be unfamiliar with it out there. But yeah, it's some of the stories like that where it goes in a different direction. That's unfortunate. But then we have the other ones like blowing up a house or the flash powder in the face. So it's always a gamble as far as some of those effects. So for every kid out there that's currently playing with like cherry bombs or something like that, you too can someday be the head of special effects on a classic film. Never give up.
But for the old days.
Yeah.
That's when we go back to practical effects.
Yeah. You too could be the head of special effects if you go back to the 80s.
I hear people that say they should take Jaws 2 and correct the problems with CGI. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Was that man George Lucas?
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
I think the main place where we're probably seeing a lot of practical effects now is more so in like independent films, things of that sort, where they might not necessarily have the staffing or have the resources to do things like the CGI work and have it look effective. That it just becomes, well, we have 10 guys here and we can probably just blow this shack up by ourselves. Put it on film. It's we'll stay under budget. So it's hopefully it's something that doesn't die out just because we still have things here and there. And hopefully maybe over time that practical effects will kind of still either make a resurgence or whatever the case may be. As I said at the top of the show, it's something that is best when it's married with CGI rather than CGI overtaking it completely. So anybody out there, keep banging the drum for practical effects. We love a good explosion. I love a good practical monster. I will always take the look of a guy in a suit or an animatronic monster over a CGI one any day.
Amen.
Zamana, as far as I know, we've gone over some of the ones that you've worked on and kind of your history with it. I always like to kind of go over and just ask, so growing up, what were some of kind of your favorite things that got you into film, or the ones that kind of caught your eye, or kind of, do you have any theater experiences that you have from over the years of the ones that you ended up loving?
I think I was always very impacted by The Exorcist. That really freaked me out when I first saw it.
Yeah.
That probably was the most impactful. I love Jaws. Of course, Jaws was only 2 years before Jaws 2, so I was in college at that time. But growing up, I don't know. I mean, I was kind of a corny kid. I because of Dad and because of Grandpa, I watched Mon Pa Kettle. I thought those were great movies.
I grew up on Turner Classic Movies as a kid, so it's
Abbott and Costello were awesome. And Groucho and the Marx Brothers were just amazing. I love comedy, so I think as a kid I probably gravitated more to comedy than anything. But special effects has always held a special place for me, for sure. I liked all the Towering Infernos and all those exciting. I
Yeah.
still like The Hanger, and I don't know. There's some other movies out there. What's that last one? That Skyscraper. That wasn't quite as good as San Andreas was.
Oh. Every so often we get another disaster movie like that, or what was it, the 2012?
Yeah, 2012. Yeah, sure.
It's I feel like it hit its high point in the 70s of all of these ones, but it's not dead. It still comes back, because I still love a good disaster movie. But as far as the special effects, kind of some of the ones that you might have had growing up, I don't know if you were ever a fan of things like the William Castle films, things of that sort. Like I know we've mentioned before, like 13 Ghosts, or I don't know if he did The Tingler, but it was all of these kind of the gimmick ones included in with it of, oh, well, this one's going to be, we're doing the effects with the monsters, or we're going to end up doing it in 3D, or
Right.
I think they did, was it Ray Milland that did The Man with the X-Ray Eyes? But it's those were all the special effects that I knew from at the time. And then that kind of led me into finding and enjoying the ones from like going into the 70s, going into the 80s, and then naturally The Thing is kind of the peak there. But it's interesting going back. So I know you laughed that you grew up on watching like those movies like Ma and Pa Kettle, but all of these things still hold up. Anybody out there, I say, go find a copy of Arsenic and Old Lace with Cary Grant. Comedy is comedy. It holds up, and even though we might get better with practical effects over time, it's still fun. It's a blast. Don't lose the magic of cinema.
Francis the Talking Mule.
It's a double feature. Watch Airport 77 and Francis the Talking Mule.
The old 1-2 punch.
They're always meant to be seen together.
Yeah, it's complementary.
I was really honored to work on La Bamba.
Yeah,
that was post Universal, because it was an independent flick at the time it was shooting. It went union right at the end, so I could have actually become a grip if I wanted to. I worked as a grip on that movie. I had a good friend who was a key grip, Gary Parker, who's no longer with us. And he approached me and said, hey, I know you don't work as a grip ordinarily, but I've got this job on La Bamba. Would you be interested? Hell yeah. I grew up in Pacoima, and Richie Valens was like a hometown hero of Pacoima. That's where he grew up. He went to Pacoima Junior High. Famously, that's where the airplane crashed in the schoolyard that gave him his fear of flying. And then we shot the Iowa airport. We shot Whiteman Airport in Pacoima, which was across the street literally from where I grew up. And that was the final scene where they get in the plane for his last airplane ride with the Big Bopper.
Is it surreal working on kind of a film or working on these things near where you grew up, or being able to point out stuff and say like, yep, I have memories there. I have memories there.
Definitely. Sure. I mean, the big funeral scene is at the San Fernando Mission. We took school outings, at the San Fernando Mission. And well, I'll tell you, working at Universal was always very surreal, because like if I'd be doing something like digging in the back lot, and then all of a sudden a tram drives by with a bunch of people checking me out while I'm digging a hole. It's like, how odd to work at a place that's a tourist attraction.
And if you look on your left, you'll see.
Here we have a laborer digging a hole. It was very weird, very strange.
So La Bamba, as you said, like that was after Universal. That was at the time an independent. Was that more towards after you had gotten out of more of the film scene? And then that kind of brought you back in, or was that kind of the tail end of?
No, it just, being a musician's tough. Yeah. And when you're producing music videos for no money,
yeah,
they were strictly promotional music videos. You never earned anything for them. It was very odd creation there, boy. But anyway, I needed money. I mean, I had friends because of the CGI thing. I had buddies who were losing their jobs, and their only recourse was to go into independent special effects companies and then pick up little independent productions that were still using traditional effects. See, that was Phantasm 2 was one of those. I worked on one with James Wood called The Boost, and where he was a coke addict and whatever. And I did one with Steel Justice with what's that guy, the sensei from Martin Cove. It was called Steel Justice, and he was a Rambo type character. Real strong guy, and some Vietnamese warlord has come over to LA to sell drugs, and so he's going to take him out. And that was another one of my fun little explosive stories too. Is we had an all-nighter in Long Beach, and we had to blow up a Lincoln Continental, a Cadillac limousine, and a Datsun 280Z. Yeah. What a trio, and just blow the hell out of them, So we had let the city of Long Beach know, but apparently the county hadn't been told. So we're under like a bridge area. There's a bunch of, it's right where, like around where the Queen Mary is. It's very industrial, very oil, refineries and stuff. And there's a big overpass. And so we blow these cars up, and the fireballs literally go above the overpass. And the county fire department acknowledged it and came. and they had to be paid a considerable amount of money for that, because they hadn't been informed that we were doing this. So they didn't know what all these explosions were.
I feel like that's the sort of thing that you might be able to get away with if you're just like shooting a scene that doesn't have the effects of just like, oh, it's one of our scenes, somebody walking down the street, or we're just talking here. But once you add in the explosions, it kind of is harder to hide.
Yes. Yeah, especially when they go, 20, 25 feet in the air.
Yeah. It's a little harder to do guerrilla filmmaking with nitro.
Oh, I think I've got a picture of that one somewhere too. So yeah, so those were all little kind of pickup. The movies that I worked with at Universal, I pretty much worked from start to finish. But the pickup stuff, I think Big Bad Mama was probably the one that I worked on the most. Well, I take that back, La Bamba. But as far as effects was concerned, Phantasm was just blowing up that house. The Boost, I was babysitting a fire on a beach, campfire on a beach for 12 hours. That kind of stuff,
I was going to say, after blowing up a house, it might be well qualified to do the campfire.
Yeah, that was small stuff there.
Stand in front of a campfire with a rubber cement and a match. Light it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Bob.
Big Bad Mama was a good one. I really have to always say that Angie Dickinson is probably the nicest star I ever worked with. Her, and on the male side would be James Garner. He was just a freaking sweetheart. I worked with him on the Rockford Files a little bit, and he would just, some stars can just be pains in the butt, and some stars can just be nice,
Which
depends on.
It's always nice hearing the stories of people like I grew up watching. Like, I love James Garner and Maverick. So then hearing that it's like, oh no, in real life he was a nice person, and it's okay. I'm glad now, because it would break my heart to find out all these things of you grew up with somebody and they tell a story of, oh yeah, they're terrible to work with, and it's well, I guess they're an actor then. They fooled me.
Yeah, well, Robert Blake had quite the reputation. I'll tell you, on New York Street, all the bathrooms on New York Street were all dedicated to Robert Blake.
Well
deserved. A little bit on Robert Conrad, but Robert Blake more so. They were the alter James Garners.
So, as far as the movies, anything that from over the years, is there any kind of advice that you had or advice that you might have gotten from kind of your time there, of anybody that's interested in film or anything of that sort, from just kind of all the people you've worked with, anything that you've picked up over time?
I think the most important lesson is pre-production, pre-production, pre-production. Man, work it out first. Be ready to have your plan together before you start shooting. The more you have it, I mean, you know, obviously things go wrong and your plan doesn't always stay true, but the more pre-planning you do, the better off you'll be in the long run.
Otherwise, you will rip the roof off of a condominium.
Exactly. Yes. You will burn your eyebrows off.
Old Flash.
Yeah, I remember him taking out a wall too one time. he wanted to do, it was one of those packed mortars, and he wanted to see how strong they were. And so he took a balsa wood door. It was probably 2 inches thick. And he put, braces on it so it would freestand. And then this mortar must have been 10 feet away from it. And there was nothing left of the door. I mean, the braces were holding on to little pieces of, and there was a huge, like 10-foot round burn mark on the wall of the stage. This was a stage, we were testing it on a stage that wasn't being used for anything. And right below the burn mark on the wall was the flammable painter's cabinet. Marked flammable like 10 times, written all over it, flammable. And we're shooting a gas mortar toward it.
Through the most structurally sound of all woods, balsa. To test a 10-pound sand mortar hitting a balsa wood door, if it would take it out. Yes, Roy, it'll take it out. Trust me. I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure I've taken out balsa doors before without explosions.
You can almost blow through them. Balsa is really funny. I love to see breakaways on TV because they just crack me up. You can see how they're scored. They try to score it to make it look like it's craggy. It's unfortunately one of the worst scenes in the thing for me is the actual teeth of Charlie's chest when it blows open, because they just it looks like an old lightning bolt type cut. It doesn't look like a rip, like a tear. There's one picture that I have. It's a continuity. It's a Polaroid continuity shot, and it's a sculpted piece that they did that actually went onto Charlie's body. Now, what you're seeing, like Nick was talking about the alien thing. When you see the actual chest rip open and grab the doctor's arms, that's the fake chest, and Charlie's actually underneath, inside the table that he's supposed to be laying on. But there's one that's an actual sculpted appliance that they made with foam latex, and they adhered it to his body. And it's beautiful. Oh my God. The guy that sculpted that, it looks so perfect. It's just, the flesh is ripped. It's just perfect the way it ripped apart. It looks like torn flesh. And you can see it for an instant. You'll see the doctor does that, and then his arms get bitten off and he falls back. And then you pulled back to the wide shot, and that's the shot of the appliance. And you can see how detailed it is. It's kind of jiggling because it's got air pumping through it, and it's, things are happening at the time. But in comparison to the way the chest rips open and then goes to this beautiful sculpted appliance, they don't look at all the same.
Yeah.
The chest that rips open, like I said, it looks so rudimentary. They're just jagged, like teeth that rip open as his arms go down in. and there's no detail. And yet the following scene, like I say, if you saw my Polaroid, you would see how detailed that appliance is. It's just the continuity of the two. And in fact, I was sure that they didn't even use that because it looked so good, it made the other look bad. But sure enough, it's there. And I was actually kind of surprised, which again goes into the thing where you watch a movie at normal speed and you don't pick it apart,
Yeah.
But if you try to pick it apart frame by frame and try to compare the two, they really were completely different. They just looked totally different.
It'll be the one time we want to pause and go analyze and just so we can see that one sculpt from there. Because as you said, like playing at normal speed, taking that, but then also like everything that's going on, the action, like all the other additives to it for anybody else watching it might never go noticed as, oh, well, this one looks better than the other one. It's, oh yeah, it's all just the same thing going. So yeah, now I'm going to be interested to go and see if I can locate that sculpt just to see that.
Well, I mean, you're focusing in on the arms going in and getting bitten up. It's like, oh my God, did you see what he just did? And then the doctor's falling backward. Of course, they hired a double amputee to play the doctor for that shot, which I'm sure you know all about that. They put an appliance on his face to make him look like the doctor. So can you imagine the head trip that guy went through to have his arms bit off? And he's already a double amputee? Oh my God. That's got to be a head trip. I'm sorry. That's got to be a head trip for him to go through. Wow.
It would have been great if the doc's last words there would have been, what a sculpt, and dies. So yeah, I think in the very near future, I know I try to rewatch The Thing every so often. It's one of my favorites. But now, especially with this and kind of hearing some of the other work and whatnot on it, it's one thing to watch it and appreciate it growing up and watch it and appreciate it as a film fan, but then also appreciate it for the craft and the work that went into it. So I think this will personally elevate it for me, being able to kind of know some of the background that we discussed here.
Well, you know that final creature took 46 guys to control.
Oh, down in when they blow it up down at the bottom?
The big, the final creature. Oh,
wow.
There was a guy on a cart that's being pushed forward by other guys with the dog creature that comes out of his belly. And everybody is on a toggle switch and rolling eyes and opening jaws and animating arms. And there's like, the thing was on a scaffolding that was probably at least 6 foot tall. And it's 8 to 10 foot tall in itself. But it had to be on the scaffolding so all the guys could get in underneath it and control something. I have a picture there. Actually, there's one on the internet that's a picture of this final creature up on its scaffolding.
I was going to say, how many takes does it take to get 46 people working in tandem?
Well, yeah, that's one of those one take, you get as many cameras on it as you can.
Yeah.
And hope for the best. No.
Looks great.
It turned out wonderful. I mean, it is. And a lot of it has to do with the lighting, of course, and Dean Cundy and the way he shot it just makes it amazing.
I think the other question that I would have is, did anybody on set ever tell you if Childs and McCready either one were the thing at the end?
No. Never speculation. That all came later. Now, one interesting little point, on the last day of shooting, first unit, that was when, on the lot, when we blew everything up, when McCready goes through room by room, throwing Molotov cocktails in and blowing up the compound. That was the last day of first unit shooting on the lot, because we were blowing the whole place up. So we set all these rooms up and they're all ready to be exploded. And the first room is the area where they go outside and all the jackets are all hanging on hooks. I just couldn't see all those jackets get blown up. So I grabbed one.
Awesome.
And I took it home, and I still actually Well, now Joe Hart's Thing Fest has it. He licensed it from me, but it turned out to be one of Child's actual jackets.
Oh,
That's
wow.
awesome.
That's really cool.
I had never really thought about whose jacket it was or anything. I just took a jacket because it was the last day of shooting.
Hell, it was going to be destroyed anyway, right?
I want, I always took strange keepsakes. And so I thought the jacket was really something that would be very cool to have.
Absolutely.
And it's hung in my closet for 35 years. And it turned out we were comparing the jacket to all the jackets on screen, and it is indeed Child's jacket. So that's really very cool. I was very, very happy to find that out.
Anyone that came over to my place, I'd be taking them. Yes, this is Child's jacket, actually. Yes, come look at this.
Answer the door for every dinner party wearing it. 90 degrees in California, I know.
My crew jacket is much more of that. Dean said he was jealous of me because I could actually still fit into my crew jacket.
I know you mentioned before that you did a Comic-Con. Was that specifically for The Thing that you appeared with Dean Cundy for? Or
yeah.
Oh, okay. Now, is that something? Do you usually see a lot of things pop up for like The Thing as far as conventions, things of that sort?
It was very random for me. I just was networking with some people on Facebook, and this one guy, Joe Hart, up in Canada, he runs a thing he calls the Thing Fest.
Aptly named.
Three guys. There's Todd Cameron that has Outpost 31, and then Joe Hart's Thing Fest. And anyway, they're almost in competition with one another. It's really weird. They're just all fans of the movie. What's the big deal? So anyway, in conversations with Joe, he had said that he had the largest collection of Thing memorabilia ever, blah, 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 and he wanted the possibility to show this jacket along with his stuff. And I said, yeah, I would love, I never took it for any real reason other than just to have a keepsake. You know, and when it first originally the movie released, it was a bomb at the box office. So it wasn't like I took it for any monetary, it was just, I just, again, it was a keepsake. And now here 35, 40 years later, all of a sudden it's heralded as the greatest flick of all time. And this guy considered it to be like the Holy Grail. Oh, that's the smoking gun that proves the child was the thing. I said, no, it doesn't prove anything.
Proves it was cold out there.
Yeah.
Well, I guess one of the conspiracies is that Childs is wearing a different jacket.
Oh.
At the end. And so Joe thinks that because I took the jacket that I made them make him wear a different jacket, and then the perception is that he's the Thing. And I said, boy, are you reaching, buddy?
I think it adds up. I think you turned Childs into the Thing.
And I said, well, wait a minute. Okay, first off, I took the jacket before they even went on location. So we have at least 2 or 3 jackets for every principal crew member of the movie. So he's filmed in it in British Columbia in the jacket. So there had to have been another jacket because I didn't go to British Columbia and I had the jacket here in LA. So there had to be another one. Sorry. Your theory is completely screwy.
Trail's gone cold. I mean, it was either the jacket or Vance Norris's head when it crawls off and turns into a spider. So
I hate to say it, but I actually had a Charlie Hallahan head. Unfortunately, I wasn't hip enough to realize that foam latex over time rots.
Deteriorates, yeah.
And you have to preserve it in certain ways. It has to be in an airtight thing or whatever if you're going to keep it for any length of time. So unfortunately, my Charlie head rotted away. But yeah, I definitely had one of those.
All of these, the things over the things, all of these memorabilia items over the years, it's amazing that, as you said, The Thing was a box office bomb at the time, and now it's heralded as one of the greats. That you never know what project you're working on that'll all of a sudden take off. So, anybody out there working on a movie, or you have a little indie idea that you're working on, you never know.
Play the long game with your movie.
And keep all your jackets.
Yes. Never burn a jacket from your film.
So as far as you said, you had kind of strange keepsakes from things just for memory's sake. Do you have any other ones that were kind of odd notables?
Well, I don't, through the years, they've kind of gone and away too. I did have an assortment of Jaws teeth that I gave away. I gave to kids over time. And I think the last couple of them I ended up selling to some collector. Just weird stuff. I have a Brody knob from the Blues Brothers. You know what a Brody knob is?
No.
Here, I'll show it to you. The Blues Brothers in there. It's called a Brody knob, and it's for car stunts. You strap these little straps go onto your steering wheel. And then
so
this
you can
Oh.
rotates.
So you can like do the
Brody knob.
yeah, okay.
And the steering wheel fast. And this one happens to have Jake and Elwood inside it. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I was gonna say that.
But that was given that was more or less given away to the crew members though as a special thing. This is kind of cool.
A gigantic light switch.
From
Light switch from Shrinking Woman.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Much bigger than the normal light switch. It's fiberglass, just pour it into a mold. Nothing big, but I thought it was cool and I brought it home. It's just weird things like that.
And plus, it's
awesome.
all these things that it's stuff you've worked on, stuff you have memories with that otherwise might end up trashed or, in the case of the jacket, blown up.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're saving a little piece of history. Have you ever used the Brody knob in your car?
Oh, no. Are you kidding me? That's a gem. That's a keepsake.
Take those hard Los Angeles turns.
I have to admit, though, the coolest thing was on Jaws 2, because we were on location, I was able to carry around a 35 millimeter camera with me. So I have an extensive photo history of Jaws 2. I probably have the best picture of the shark burn I think anybody ever took.
That's pretty cool.
And yeah, as a matter of fact, there's this book by Mike Smith called The Making of a Hollywood Sequel, Jaws 2. Anyway, he had done a printing of it, and I met up with him online, and he ended up doing a second printing, and he included all the pictures that I have, which is really cool.
Oh.
That is great.
And like 28 pages of story of interviews and stories and stuff. So that was kind of fun.
Did they originally, was having the camera on set kind of your idea of just kind of cataloging some things, or was that something that was part of the...
I just, I was a tourist too. I mean, I'd never been to Florida, so I just wanted a camera on me, and it turned out that I'd started taking some really interesting pictures of behind the scene, which just kind of through the years, all of a sudden I just have this book of some cool shots. I wish I'd have taken more in thought of documenting the film itself, but it's interesting. It's funny what survives over 40 years.
Yeah.
I find that in my father's history too, to find these pictures of these sessions that he did, and it's like what survives and what doesn't survive. It's amazing. It's just amazing.
Yeah.
I wish I'd had been able to have a camera on the thing, but of course they were way too secretive. Oh my God. They didn't want Fangoria or Cineflex or whatever the popular periodical was at that time to have pictures of the creatures too early.
Right.
So that was a big deal. We had these pins, the thing pins. You had to have that on to be able to access the set.
Oh.
So they were very secretive about who even got on the set to see the creatures. They didn't want anything to be released before the release of the movie. Of course, they anticipated it was supposed to be a blockbuster. You just never know. They always blame E.T., of course. They always say it's because E.T. was the fuzzy, warm alien. Ours was the vicious, evil, human-eating alien.
Well, they could have always sent Fangoria the pictures of 3 mini helicopters. New hot images from on set.
It's so funny. It's like pulling teeth to get Stu to even admit that. It's so funny. And nobody ever tells the story. It's like, okay, yeah, I know it's a cool story. It's cool enough. I think it just shows that there is it's so hit and miss in movies. Even at the highest level, it's still hit and miss.
Yeah.
Still, it's trial and error. You think, especially special effects, because you'll literally use anything out there if you can achieve the desired effect.
Yeah.
And, carving giant fortune cookies out of foam. There's so many different things that you can use for whatever it is. The more diverse you are, the better off you will be for special effects.
And especially during that time frame where there wasn't a lot of precedent on a lot of these things, that it's, as you said, it's trial and error. There's no, well, we can do it like this movie did it. Well, The Thing, there wasn't another thing before that it's like, oh, well, we'll do it like this. So it's coming up with new things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, but they always seem to find a way at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a field I always wanted to get into, and you really did have to kind of you don't have to know what you're doing, but you have to get your hands into as many different pots as possible, trying to figure out how to get from point A to B. At least I always thought so.
Yeah.
So I know we're running a little over 2 hours here. I wanted to make sure for anybody out there, any of our listeners, anything that you want to let them know about, anything that they should be aware of, use our platform. What do you got?
Well, yeah, I mean, you already eloquently asked about my documentary, and I appreciate that. That's really right now my life's work. I'm kind of a schlep out here in LA. I'm managing an apartment building that keeps a roof over my head and pays me minimum wage. So that's pretty much my life. And in between that, I still continue to collect pieces of my father's life and work on introducing this project to whoever I can. And I'm really excited about this International Society of Bassists and Eastman School of Music, because it's really going to bring a new light to Dad. And I think it's been weird in the past, but I think there's a greater appreciation right now for the true innovators of jazz. That there has been for the last couple of decades. So somebody's so into the glitz and the glam of the pop life, that they don't really take a proper perspective of real music, of real dedicated innovators of the art form. And I in schools, I think there is a renaissance of players out there that appreciate people like Charlie Parker and Chet Baker, and these major names that really dedicated their lives to the art form. That's kind of what we're missing now. I think things are so easy now. You can just program music and not even understand what you're doing. It just sounds cool,
Yeah.
and people are willing to accept music that's all created by machines now. You can, sample the Czechoslovakian Symphonic Orchestra and have them play your symphony in your home.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's just weird time nowadays. And I think that if we get back to really appreciate the innovators again, the practical effectsers.
Yeah.
That's a great analogy, actually. You got to work with your instrument, and I think they've kind of gotten away from that, and I hope there's more of a renaissance of that coming back. And appreciating people like my dad would help that along.
Yeah,
I think.
Which I think, as you said, like all of the artists over the years, all of these other things, for anybody out there, it's if you get interested in jazz, if you're getting interested in music, if you're getting interested in movies, there is so much back catalog that you can work through right now. So you don't have to wait for what else is coming out. Go check out some of the older stuff. You have so many options out there that you'll listen to something new every day or watch something new every day from now until the end of the decade, finding something interesting. So go do some research. Check it out. Go to it's Jazz in Hollywood is your Facebook. And now does that have that, or is it also just music?
It's actually got more history than anything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really have music posted on it as much because there are links around all over the internet that have the music.
Mm-hmm.
I've got more like stories, the pictures, the articles, contracts, things that tell the stories of the background of how these things came about. Jam sessions that were formative in LA that helped to define the rise of bebop in Los Angeles. Again, the bossa nova. It's interesting because there are contributions that, in a sense, if they aren't credited to my father, then they aren't even credited to the West Coast School of Jazz, which, arguably speaking, those were creations that happened on the West Coast and were contributed by that kind of cool jazz scene.
Yeah.
And, and in the essence that they've been taken away from him, they've also been taken away from the West Coast. So bossa nova is a creation from Brazil. But it was created here a decade before it came from Brazil,
Yeah.
And Lorendo even talks about going down to Brazil and taking boxes of his albums and handing them all out to his friends, So how more influential can you be in an art form, So again, that kind of cool, laid back blending, fusion, that happened in Hollywood that you didn't have. See, Hollywood LA is a big melting pot anyway. People come from everywhere. And so this is the logical place where all those influences came together. The samba, the traditional modern jazz. My dad was experimenting with different formations of bass lines underlying these traditional Brazilian folk songs. So all of a sudden, this kind of new form of music was being created right then and there. And that's that innovation that is missing in today's music.
Yeah.
So
as far as is Jazz in Hollywood the kind of the on the Facebook, is that the best place to reach you for any listeners out there? Or okay. So for anybody out there, throw on a jazz album, go on Facebook, check out Jazz in Hollywood, get a little history behind what you're listening to out there. Certainly going to be a good time.
And look up Harry Babasin too.
Yes.
Harry. Now I'm Yervant Harry Babasin III. Dad was Yervant Harry Babasin II, and my grandfather, of course, was the first. Now he was a dentist and he went by Doc. And my dad used his middle name for his professional name. So he was always known as Harry. So nobody's ever used Yervant. So I'm the only one that ever used it in a credit.
Yeah, I was gonna say, except your special thanks on the thing.
Yeah, I like the Blu-ray. The Blu-ray gave me a special thanks to Yervant Babasin. Boy, that was pretty awesome. I really like that.
That's cool.
So I have to say, it's been a blast being able to talk movies, talk music, kind of hear some of these stories. So on behalf of all of us, we really appreciate kind of taking the time to sit and chat with us on all of this. So thank you for coming on.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah. It was my pleasure and an honor for you guys to even talk to me about it.
Oh, well.
Again, it's something I did 40 years ago, for crying out loud. It's like, wow. And now to all of a sudden, they flew me to Canada. All expenses paid. And I got to sit on the couch with Dean Cundy. I got Dean Cundy, like one of the master creators and the guy that cleaned up the entrails on stage 24.
You were the only one in the Thing jacket.
But I could fit in my jacket. Yeah. He was jealous of me for that, right? Oh boy. fun is that?
So yeah, it's been a great time. It's been a blast. We really do appreciate it. It's really been a pleasure having you on.
Again, thank you very much. I really had a lot of fun, and I appreciate you guys taking the time.
Of course.
No, thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, gang, that wraps up another episode of Screen Refresh, and a big thank you to Von Babson again for coming on to talk practical effects, our favorite films, and all that jazz. Anyone that wants to reach him, go to Jazz in Hollywood on Facebook, and for anybody that wants to reach us, find us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at Screen Refresh, or shoot an email to screenrefresh@gmail.com to let us know what your thoughts are and some of your favorite practical